Hi, on the Woodpecker today, I'm making a shoe rack. My daughter has a lot of boots in the plastic rack next to the front door. Her closet is also full of shoes. I can't grasp the concept of owning so many shoes. One should only have one good pair of shop shoes, with glue drops on them to give them character. So I decided to build her a Lazy Suzanne shoe rack for her birthday. I begin with several sheets of plywood. I don't often work with nice plywood, but when I do, I always buy shop grade. I always find a couple of defects, usually on the edges, but for the price, it's unbeatable. I can certainly live with those defects. But a full sheet is too big, so I cut it at 32.5 inches on its length. Then I mark the center for a 32-inch circle and mark it with a trammel. Then, with a brad point bit, I drill a 5/16 hole in the center, but not through the plywood. In this hole, I put a length of dowel and use the jig I made to cut the circles. It's so simple. It's just a scrap piece of masonite with a 5/16 hole at one end and another of 7/16, 32 inches away. This is the same size as the only router bushing I found. A bigger one would have been better, but I can't find one right now. By the way, this hole had a small mishap on my first try, but even with its odd shape, the bushing works perfectly. To use this jig, I put the bushing on my router plate and put the router on the jig, the bushing inside the hole. Then with a 1/4 inch spiral router bit, I cut the circle. I cut it in several passes by lowering the bit between each passes. I cut all the circles like this, but when I was doing the last one of my first plywood sheets, I realized that I didn't take into account the width of the router bit, so they're not even 32 inches wide. So I changed my 1/4 inch bit for a 5/16 one. This way, the circle will be a little smaller. If I had used an inch bushing, like I wanted to, I could have put a 1/2 inch bit so the circle would have been even smaller. But this will have to do. When all the 7 circles are cut, I sand their edges with my linear sander and a homemade sanding block, made from styrofoam. Then I leave the circles aside for a while and cut strips for the central post. When I have enough of them, I route the special shape to turn those strips into an hexagon. It's not really a special shape. I bought this bird's mouth router bit to make the profile, but I could have easily tilted my saw blade at 30 degrees, added a sacrificial fence to my table saw rib fence, and with a dado set, make the profile. After a couple of tries, I would have found the exact tilting angle, but I was too lazy and bought a router bit instead. Next, I cut the strips at their right length. The day before, with scraps, I had glued a test hexagon. I use it to trace the shape of the interior on a sheet of paper. Then I cut the circle straps to the width of the interior of the hexagon. I glue the paper shape on a piece of scrap and cut it to shape. Now I use it to trace the hexagon shape, and I cut all of them. After finding their center, I drill a 5/16 hole in them to be able to insert a threaded rod. On the last one, I drill a bigger hole and insert a 5/16 T-nut. Now I can glue the hexagon. I start by sticking blue tape on the exterior. Then I mark a line in the center of the interior. On this line, I nail small half-inch nails. This is how I'll proceed to glue this. I'll close all 6 sides together, drop the center into the nails, and close it. That's it. Okay, now I have to redo this with glue. I use molding glue to do this because the glue is thick and less runny. I put a bead of glue on each corner's profile and a line over the nails line. Then I just do the same thing I showed you before. I stick 2 small lengths of blue tape to hold everything together. Then I use a long rubber band to clamp this. I make several turns. That's what it looks like when it's all clamped together. You can see that the glue is barely running inside. Now I have to do the same thing to complete the 5 tubes and leave them to dry overnight. The next morning, I sand them. Then I can begin gluing the circles edge bending. When I'm done ironing the edges, I cut the excess. Then I recheck if I left some unglued sections and reglue them. Then I sand each circle. The edges are unsanded. Now I can glue the top circle block. To do so, I must drill 4 holes, spread some glue, and screw it down. Before spraying the finish, I must do a couple of things, like vacuuming the dust from the sanding. I trace a circle in the center of the bottom circle so the Lazy Susan's bearing gets centered and mark the screws placements. Then I can spray everything. I begin with the central posts. Followed by the circles. I end up using all my shop space to let the circles dry. The central posts take way less space. But when their varnish is dry, I must scrub it. But instead of scrubbing it by hand like I normally do, I use a linear sander. All the circles receive the same treatment. Then I wipe the varnish dust with a damp rag and give them 2 other coats of varnish. When the 3rd coat is dry, I drill the screw holes that I marked previously and drill the bigger holes to be able to screw both lower circles together. I must be careful not to drill right through the plywood. The hole must be finished on the other side. Nice advice. I should have used it. Now I must reglue some part of the veneer. Lucky for me, it's just the bottom of the rack, so nobody will ever see it. The last hole to drill is the big hole in the base. With it, I'll be able to assemble the whole rack. But before, I must screw the Lazy Susan on the first circle, then the base. Then I can finally assemble everything to see what it will actually look like. I start by putting the top circle on the floor, then screw the long threaded rod inside the T-bolt. Then each sections of the rack. The last thing to do is to screw the bolt which holds everything together. While this is upside down, I screw the furniture gripper. Now with some help, yes, I need help because this thing is very heavy now. We turn it on its feet and see how it looks. Not that bad actually. Now I must disassemble it to store it somewhere until Chantal's birthday. On her birthday, she assembles it all. Right from the beginning, Rennie came to help her. To put this on its feet, she needs more than her mother's help. Now she can fill it with some of her pairs of shoes. When it's in place, it's pretty obvious. This thing is huge. But I'm not worried, because Chantal is moving out in a couple of weeks. Thanks, and see you in a few weeks for the next episode of The Woodpecker.